Underwood. Thin ice! To smoke some weed and shut up. My God.
Oh, there it is.
Boom!
Yes!
All right. Episode 169, Shades of Kramer at the Kenny Rogers Roasters Seinfeld episode with the red lights there if you see the video. All right. Brian Binz, Armchair Illini, joining us. Brian, how you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me, guys.
Yeah, thanks
No
for
problem.
coming on.
Thanks for coming on. We can't get Brad Underwood's too cool for our show, but whatever.
I'm not too bad second, I'd like to think.
That's right.
I mean,
right.
you
Right
might be
underneath
first.
him.
You might be first.
Yeah.
I don't know. At this point, Brad, whatever. I was about to turn that into a full-fledged radio interview, but we're not going to do that. Episode 169, right? Yeah. September. I don't even know if we did a September episode last year. We might not have, but
It's because you couldn't find anybody to come on.
yeah, the people. Well, last year I kind of went shooting for the stars, like, hey, D Brown, which D Brown, by the way, D Brown has been following me on Twitter for years and just doesn't respond. So I don't know what's up with that. Whatever. God even knows why he follows me. That's a terrible decision.
We got a guest here, and you just said you were shooting for the stars, and now we got him.
Yeah. Well, I'm not even
on the moon, right?
I'm not even. You're just trying to make something out of nothing.
I am.
Tyler. But anyway, I was kind of waiting for a few comments to roll in. I just touched my mic. Probably just ruined the audio. All right. Why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about what you do at Armchair Illini and all that stuff. Go ahead.
Sure thing. So my name is Brian, obviously. I was a student at the university, class of 2020. So I was there towards the start of the Underwood era and the end of the Gross era. My freshman year was the last year of Gross, and then my sophomore year was the first year of the new regime, the current regime. And at the time, I was working for the Daily Illini, the student newspaper on campus, and so I had a semester of covering the basketball team. That was IO's freshman year, so the year that they were very poor, but showed some of the signs of what they're going to be. Obviously, in hindsight, it's a little easier to see when they were losing 20 games. But you could kind of see the foundations of what they've more or less become the last couple of years. And then obviously now I'm working for Armchair Illini, where I cover mainly the basketball team, mostly entirely the basketball team, as that's my passion. But I do video breakdowns of prospects. I do pregame previews and postgame recaps, and just break things down.
Yeah. That's so you were there during the kind of the bad season. You got to see
I saw some nasty basketball. Yes.
Yeah. Some tough basketball
stuff.
But
like I said, it was nice to be kind of like being on the ground floor. Like you guys all Illinois fans know what the last couple of years have been like. Going from where it was really bad, especially at the end of that Gross era, where they had teams basically who didn't go weeks or months without dunking the basketball in a game, to now we have guys who can dunk.
Everybody can dunk.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, which is crazy. And then you see fans that Illinois fans, of course, they still have that thing where it's like fire Underwood now, and it's like, do they forget those days? It makes you wonder.
It's very easy to forget when they're it's only been 4 years. I guess is kind of a weird way to put it, but it feels like a long time ago now, and
sure,
it's almost like it's almost a tough spot where they've gotten so good to where you kind of have to get to the point where you need to continue to see that growth, because it was so quick and so basically a straight line up for literally 3 years in a row.
Right.
You kind of have to remember that it's not, that line's not always going to be straight up. There's going to be times where it's a flat line. There's going to be times where it dips down a little bit, but I think that they've got a team this year that might be able to get it going back up again.
Yeah. So we hope so. And with this team, I know you had a nice write-up about Ty Rodgers and becoming Illinois' point guard. Can you just elaborate on if you think Ty Rodgers is the right guy? Can he handle it?
I think, they obviously got stuck in a tough spot where they went all in on Ray J. Dennis. That, I don't need to talk all that much about that. Everyone kind of at this point knows what went down there.
Right.
I think that, once that went the way it did, they were going to have to either make a scramble, or they're going to have to roll with what they had. And, like more or less kind of got stuck in the middle when they had when they had the Jeremiah Williams thing. It sounded like, from what I could tell, that was never going to, he was never going to play this year between the Achilles thing and then, obviously the gambling thing.
That was weird,
and the second
deal.
time transfer.
Yeah.
That was just never going to happen. So I wouldn't be surprised if they kind of did that, knowing that Ty was probably going to be the guy anyway. Like I said, once Ray J was gone, they had to roll with what they had. And I think that out of the pieces that they had on the roster, I think that Ty was the best piece. And for the reasons that I said in the article, it's mostly because of the fact that Coleman came back that this can really work. And that's because Coleman is, a very skilled stretch five. He can facilitate offense, and mostly he just gives you that spacing advantage at the five that allows, let's be honest, a complete non-shooter in Ty Rodgers, someone who literally didn't even take jump shots last year, to be able, even if he is the same guy as he was shooting last year, that can at least be, a workable offensive setup when you have a guy like Coleman who can really stretch things out and can also take that playmaking burden to where you don't need to spam Ty Rodgers, 20, 30 pick and rolls like you would an Io, like you would Andre Curbelo, in some games like you would a Trent Frazier when he's feeling it. It's something that where, if Ty isn't playing very well, you can have him do the other things that he did last year and kind of lean on those other guys, and not just Coleman, but also I think Damask was a big pickup, and obviously another year of Terrence continuing to develop could be a big help in that regard as well.
Sure. Do you think when Brad recruited Ty Rodgers that he'd be his point guard?
I don't think so. I don't think so. Obviously it's a strange time in college basketball. Everyone's kind of adjusting on the fly. And, I don't think that anyone would have predicted this time last year that we would be having Ty Rodgers as the point guard with, Sky and Epps on the roster.
Yeah.
And even, just with the portal success that they'd had, you would have thought that they would have been able to get either a Ray J or even just like a secondary option, like a, kind of like the guy, like even Harmon, I guess, kind of fits that bill where, it's a guy who can at least kind of do it, but maybe more someone a little power five level, just based off of the success that they've had. But to answer your question, no, I don't think he was here to play point guard. I think obviously he has a lot of traits that lend himself well to being able to fill a hole like that. If that's, if you got a leak in the ship, which obviously they did after the Ray J situation. And I think that, I think his profile and at least his, his pass first kind of mentality might fit this roster a little bit better than maybe the two shoot first guys that they had last year in Sky and Epps.
Yeah.
And especially around, the Coleman Terrence, those two NBA guys, having a guy who's more focused on maybe making sure that they're getting going versus I'm getting going can be something that maybe can help alleviate the ups and downs of the offense, because your two best players will have it going hopefully more often than they did last year.
Yeah, and I say this a lot on ours is about how with Illinois' offense, really all you need is a guy to get the ball up the court. After you get up the court, Illinois' offense is kind of ran without a true point guard.
Yep.
So,
yeah, I mean, go ahead, please.
Oh, you're fine. Ethan, you want to say anything, buddy?
I was waiting to call the chat out because nobody had commented at all. And then Henkel just takes a shot at me. Jesus. What I was gonna say, fellas, if you allow me, what I was gonna say is that the idea that Illini fans kind of got, and I think that I did this too. I definitely tried to drive Twitter impressions from this on our account. The Ray J. Dennis thing, it's like this team did not need a point guard that is score first. And that's exactly what he is. Like, he's a guy who's going to score 18 to 20 a game. I'm sure he'll be great at Baylor, and Illini fans will be crying about that. But they need a facilitator. And that's what Ty Rodgers is. Ty Rodgers is probably one of the worst shooters that you're ever going to see. I mean, at that size, that guy should be able to at least hit a mid-range jumper. And he had the 1 3-point attempt last year. It wasn't even remotely close. Like it might have been closer to the other basket. That's how far off that was. But I just don't understand why Illini fans kind of went all in on Ray J. Dennis and thought that this is the guy that needs to be the one. Like if you want to have like a team similar to last year and you bring in a guy who's not a facilitator at all. And like Brian said, Coleman coming back is a huge part of this, but Ray J. Dennis at the one, that's a guy that's going to just be score first, and it's not going to help their offense at all.
I think Illinois had a guy like that wasn't a point guard.
I feel like you're taking another shot.
I'm not taking any shots.
Well, let's put it this way. Last year's team went down because RJ Melendez stunk, and that's the only reason. And I refuse to act like Matthew Meyer ever existed because he was good, but guess what? He's not to blame. Because you know what? You remember the Iowa game on the road?
I think he was good until it mattered, though. That's the problem.
I also think he was worn down, and then Zach Edey tried to murder him. So, I mean,
that is true.
We can't forget about that.
He was playing with a broken tailbone for the last half of the season.
Nobody talked about it, did they?
Nope.
Nobody. In the Wisconsin game on the road, how great was he in that game? Illinois doesn't have any success on the road last season without Matthew Meyer. But anyway.
Indiana on the road without Terrence. He was incredible in that game as well.
If Luke Goody could make a shot or RJ could make one at the end there.
RJ missed like 3 wide open layups in a row. There was times where he was really the only positive offense that they had. And I think that they're really going to miss that because he was a guy that, even on the bad days, you could throw him the ball and, it might
he'd get a shot
into a step back three. It might turn into a, wild, crazy mid-range shot. But, he was at least a guy who could get the ball on the rim.
Yeah.
And when you got, Coleman and Dane out there, those are guys who can really crash the glass. Ty is going to be a big plus. I think especially if point guards are guarding him, that's going to be a real problem for opposing teams when he's crashing the glass like that. But they're going to need to replace that self-creation somewhere because, I'm hoping Coleman can take a step up there, especially against centers. He's got the mobility advantage, I think, there a lot more than at the power forward spot, which is, I think, part of the reason why I back him to start over Dane because of that advantage that he has at the 5 offensively. And, Terrence is a great driver. He's an incredible downhill player. He draws a ton of fouls, and he's a very good half-court player, I think. But there's times, especially against the best defenders, which are going to be the guys that are going to be checking him, there's going to be times where, he's not going to be able to get to that left hand, and we're going to have to see if he can adjust to that because at times last year that was a real problem for him. And I think that's where Quincy Guerrier and Damask step in because those are two guys who have had self-creation reps at other places. Obviously, Damask at the lower level at SIU, and Guerrier only really had 1 year of it at Syracuse where he put it all together. At Oregon, he was kind of up and down. But I think that, both those guys are probably going to be guarded by second options, because the primary guy is going to be on Coleman in the front court and the primary guy on the back court is going to be on Shannon. So those are going to be guys, because last year you had Melendez being guarded by the worst defender and he couldn't really do anything with that. I thought that was a big problem to why their 5-out didn't work was because they didn't really have any natural advantage creators to kind of open up that, that first time the defense collapses, you spray it out. It's either an open 3 or the defense has to shift some more. They didn't really have that because Shannon isn't much of a passer. Their point guards were both score first. Myers obviously very score first, and 90% of his possessions ended in jump shots. And then Coleman was just kind of up and down even when he was at center. So they're going to need improvement on that. And I think that, like I said, Damask has a lot of experience with shot creation now at the lower level, obviously. And then I think Guerrier also can take advantage of some of those situations, and they're going to need that to really make that 5-out work.
See, Brian calls him Guerrier.
Anyway,
he's French, right? French Canadian.
It's kind of like you were looking at our Google Doc here because my next question was, what transfer do you think will have the biggest impact on this team between Harmon, Domask, and Guerrier?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because they've had great production from transfers the entire Underwood era, going back to even like Andres Feliz coming from JUCO, came right in and filled a big time role. And then even continuing to guys like Grandison. And then last year, obviously, Mayer and Shannon took it, to an all-conference level. Even Plummer was a guy who came in and was an all-conference player. So yeah. I think one of those guys is going to hit. If I had to guess, I'd have to guess that it's probably going to be Damask. I'm a big fan of all three of the guys they brought in, especially in the roles that they're looking to play him in. I think that that Guerrier is much better at power forward than he is at more so on the perimeter, especially in the Big Ten. I think he can do some stuff like Dante Scott, where he's kind of like, if you put a littler guy on him, like a DeMonte Williams type power forward, he can bully him on the block. And then if you put a slower, bigger guy, a more traditional power forward, maybe like a Tyler Wall type, maybe he can stretch those guys out, even just providing space for other players to operate. I think Harmon's going to be a big asset off the bench. I'm fascinated to see the minute split between him and Sincere because I think that both of them are two-way players. who are both very questionable jump shooters, especially in the Spain trip. Harmon had some ugly misses on jump shots. Obviously, we know Sincere. I swear that guy doesn't take two of the same jump shot in the row every time. It looks like a different form. So, we'll see what happens there. But I like Harmon a lot. He's got a lot of experience. I think that him being a guy who's, from the Chicago area, I like that a lot in Illinois players. I think that makes him really play hard for the team. And, he's the guy who obviously came here knowing that he wasn't going to be, the guy. And so I think he's not going to get mad when he might have to eat like a 10-minute game or a 5-minute game because Sincere's got it going, or DGL's got it going, or maybe Ty and Shannon are just going so hard you can't take them out, kind of thing, or just the biggest games that someone's going to get cut out of that rotation. They're not going to play 10 guys, the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th game in the Big Ten season. By that point, it's like 8 guys, 9 guys if you're really rolling deep. So I think he'll be more poised to take that more than like an Epps or even a Sincere at times. Last year I thought struggled with consistency mentally. But to bring you to my main point, I think Damask is the guy who's going to be the main producer out of those 3. And I think it's for the reasons that I said, where he's going to be guarded by, not to be, dismissive, but, white shooters, worse defenders, smaller guys. He did a lot of Jalen Pickett booty ball at Southern Illinois. So I think he can really take advantage of those matchups. And then, if you're going to, and then at the same time, he's also a good shooter. So you can't leave him when Terrence drives, when Coleman's able to draw the defense, when Ty is able to get 2 feet in the paint. He's going to be a guy who, if you leave him open, he's going to make shots.
Yeah.
I also wanted to get into this comment here. Hinkle again. I mean, geez, we could use some more commenters to maybe overtake Hinkle here. Whatever. He says, if Ray J wouldn't have been the best fit as a score first guard, why did the staff go all in on him? Let me just say this. Are we sure that the staff went as hard for Ray J Dennis as
Illini Twitter did?
Like, I don't know if they truly went, quote, all in, because I think if they went all in,
the biggest problem was from an outsider looking in was Terrence Shannon and Coleman Hawkins coming back, right? I mean, that kind of took some NIL money away from him. It kind of changed the whole, makeup of this team. So
I'd also wager that once Shannon and Hawkins came back, the need for Ray J was not quite so much. And both of those went down to, Shannon, it seemed like the people who read the tea leaves seemed to think that he was coming back pretty early in the process, which is shocking. I would have thought he was gone the second the Arkansas game ended.
Right.
And then Coleman obviously went a little more down to the wire, especially for those of us who have our hand on the pulse, so to speak, or behind the paywall. So yeah, I think once both those guys came back, I think that the need for an offensive hub like Ray J, who, like I said, is a guy you can just throw the ball to and you can spam pick and roll over and over, and he'll get you good looks, either for himself or other guys. I think the need for that went down a lot. But I think the reason why the all-in thing is continued to put around is because it really did seem like they didn't have a backup plan. And I think that a lot of people went into the offseason kind of, especially after the loss of Clark and Epps, really thinking like, okay, we need a big splash at point guard. And so when they didn't get the big fish, and then there also wasn't like the backup plan was, okay, we're rolling with Ty, I think that was a tough pill for a lot of people to swallow. And so they kind of just were like, okay, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
Well, I remember talking about during the season last year, like maybe February, maybe like after the Ohio State game when they lost in Columbus.
That was bad, man.
Oh,
that was a nasty one.
That was the quintessential loss for that team. Yeah. Not surprising that they would have lost a game like that against that Ohio State team. But I remember talking about like maybe Ty Rodgers is the point guard next year. Like, I think that was a thought that people had, and I don't really it's always the opposite happens of what people think in terms of, people thought that Hawkins would be more likely to come back than Shannon, but I think Shannon was always more likely to come back than Hawkins. And that kind of turned out to be, they both came back. But like you said, we had a pretty good idea that it would be Shannon for sure and not so sure about Hawkins. So I think people thought, okay, Illinois is definitely going to go out and get a big time splash point guard, when in reality, they're just going to go with Ty Rodgers. And I think that was a thought that I would bet the coaching staff had last season, where it's like, we'll look at options and we'll go after players that we think would be good, and we'll throw some NIL money around, but we like Ty Rodgers as well. So I think that Illinois liked Ty Rodgers this entire time a lot more than people think. They're not really just falling back on Ty Rodgers. I think they like him to play that position. I don't think that they thought that, as we alluded to earlier in the show, when he came to Illinois, but he showed flashes of being able to do it last year. And also the standard for a point guard for last year's team was so freaking low where you would have to think, and props to me for not dropping an F-bomb right there. You would have to think that, Sky Clark was a complete disaster. Jaden Epps was an undersized 2. Yeah. Ty Rodgers, Sincere Harris is just not – he could probably do it.
He's not a point guard.
He's
a dribble the ball up and pass it point guard.
Yeah.
He's not a run, pick, and roll.
Yeah.
So Ty Rodgers is the closest they have to that, and a lot of the point guards out there in the portal this season were not overly intriguing for what Illinois is looking for. A lot of score-first guys or guys that just haven't done it at this level. And I understand Ty Rodgers really hasn't done it at this level, but he's done, he ran the point.
Got to play some
a little bit last season
as a freshman.
And he's going to be playing on the floor with a lot of similar guys this season. So I think continuity in that regard matters a little bit. Like if Ray J. Dennis comes in, you're going to get some more headlines and you're going to probably score some more points early in the season. But is that the best fit and scheme and roster to get deep into March, which is the entire point of this program right now? Probably not.
Yeah.
Like Ray J. Yeah, it's flashier. We've done flashier. They've tried that before. Shannon and Meyer last year is like, oh man, look, Illinois wins the portal. And that team last season was awful. I don't even know how did they even make the tournament? That team stunk. That team, we can say it now that it's been over for 6 months.
Negative Ethan.
That team made the tournament because of wins in November and December.
Yeah, down the stretch.
They happened.
Yeah. and they were also the opposite of other Underwood seasons where they made runs late in the season and looked good going into the tournament and then just got stupid, ridiculous draws that only this program could get because this program is too close to Chicago. I know it's a couple hours, but Chicago, sports-wise, I mean, not even, they don't ever get any luck, as we saw on Sunday. Shout out to the Chicago Bears. They suck. But, like, it's never – we're never going to get – like, okay, let's throw this example out there. Not even basketball. How about golf? How many times is Illinois going to have a great golf team and not win a championship or even get close? Makes no sense. We're never going to – you're just going to have to get lucky. And, of course, 04-05, they have an undefeated team, and they still don't win the national championship. Where are the comments? All right.
The last thing I'll say about the Ray J thing is that this staff is not shy about adding talent, regardless of fit. I think you saw them grab Epps and Clark, who are both very similar profiles last year. They added Perrine super late last year, even though they already had Coleman and Dane, and we're going to be adding Amani and Morez. So they've always been, they added Nico. Who knows if that guy's going to play Nico Moretti? I think he's got some talent. So they're not really afraid about adding guys. Like they're always, if they have a chance to add a guy, they're going to add a guy. And so I think that Ray J was, if not the best, then, one of the 3 best point guards and even players in the portal. And so when you have a guy who's from Illinois and you think you have a chance at, you're going to make a run at that guy because he's a good basketball player.
Yeah. It seems like they're not afraid of having competition.
Yeah.
But you kind of saw they kind of gave everything to Sky Clark, and then Sky Clark kind of
Yes. Okay. That's how you run. That is how you run a sports franchise or a program. You bring in the talent and you put the pieces together, compete. And sometimes it doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for this team. So why would they try to do it again? I understand the idea of going after Ray J. Dennis, great player from, what is he, from Oswego? Is that how you say it? Oswego? There you go. One of the 3.
Yeah.
That's how you run. People don't understand sometimes. Like, that's how you do it. You bring in the most talent possible. And then you see they weren't undefeated. Okay, yeah, Hinkle, I made a mistake.
Ethan was 2 years old. It's okay.
I was speaking too fast. Also, I was like 6, but whatever. I'm like, yeah, whatever. It's just that's how you do it. Yeah. You bring in the most talent possible, and it doesn't work sometimes.
Absolutely.
And are we sure Brad Underwood's the type of coach that can win games with? Does he need the most talent, or does he need the team that fits his scheme the most? And
his personality.
Yes. And Stephen F. Austin, those teams were the most talented and they were really good. So I think that he's leaning more towards he doesn't need the most talent. He needs a team of players that fit well together. And I think that's the entire idea of what this team should be.
I think that's what this, This team seems more like that than last year.
They're much more different than previous Underwood teams we've seen here, mostly because they do have some of the NBA talent, but they also have some of the guys that could be like really, really good college players.
Yeah.
Which last season they had. I think Jaden Epps is going to be a very good college player, but on a Brad Underwood team with Terrence Shannon on it, how much sense does it make for him to be trying to play the 2 when he's like 5'11"? I don't care what he's listed at. He ain't that tall. But yeah, we'll see. I don't know. Imbrats chimes in finally. Jeez. I imagine in a Illini team. I'm sorry. Where a guy shoot 40% from 3. Yeah, that's not happening. I mean, that's not happening. I mean,
have we had a team with 3 guys that have shot 40%?
It's college basketball. How many teams have
Baylor?
Even the Kofi Big Ten title year, they had Plummer, who I think was above 40.
Yeah.
I don't think Trent was above 40. I don't think Grandison would have probably been close, like 38, something like that. I know DeMonte had a bad year shooting. Like it's hard to get guys who can shoot like that.
Yeah.
Even just like college. If this team shoots like 33, 34%, that would be more than fine. They don't need to shoot anything.
And they take 10 less.
I'd rip your hand off for 34% right now. Like I would literally reach through the screen and rip your hand off.
Yeah.
They had 2 guys that year. They had Plummer 41, Grandison 41.
Plummer was so nice, man. That guy was so nice.
What a weapon. Yeah.
And also Curbelo went 6 for 34. Anyway, but yeah, like the teams that have guys that shoot that far or 40% from 3 is pretty much Baylor, and then other teams in the past few. Like there's not very many. Like I obviously remember the Baylor one because they won a national championship, and there was the whole thing about Jared Butler, Davion Mitchell, Matthew Meyer. Flagler was there. Who's the other guard? Maceo Teague, I believe.
Yeah, there was a Teague. There's so many Teagues.
I mean, yeah,
I think there was one of the Teagues that was there.
Yeah. So like last season's team from 3 was a disaster. And I know that people want to put stock into the Spain trip, how they shot. It's just different, it's different competition. It's a different ball. As a shooter myself, I would know. But the rims are a little different. It's just I'm not putting too much stock into that because I think once you get back into, because they're going to be playing 1 billion games in the State Farm Center before they even really, go out. I mean, what's the first game where they're actually traveling? Is it the MSG? No, it might be the MSG game.
It might be the MSG game.
Yeah, so they're going to be at home for a long time. So if they can't figure out how to shoot in that environment against Western Illinois or Southern, or I guess they don't play Colgate till mid-December now. Apparently, there was a schedule change, but whatever. Tyler thinks they're going to lose to Colgate,
especially with that change. So,
have you seen? Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead and look up Colgate's performances against power conference schools.
It was just an initial thought. Calm down.
It was not. It was just,
Hinkle said that you're taking over the show, and you felt like you hadn't said enough, and now you won't stop talking.
That's what's going on business. That's the
all right. Next question.
Thank you.
Asked about the transfers. Want to ask about the freshmen. What freshman do you think will have the biggest impact?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn. I think that just due to the opportunity, it's going to be really hard for Amani, who I'm a huge fan of. I did a write-up of him on Armchair Illini. He's one of my favorite prospects they brought in. He's a super skilled 4-5. I could even see him later in his career moving out more towards the perimeter. I think he has the skeleton of a good jump shot, and I think he's a very strong perimeter instincts where he's able to really pass out there and read the game. He can dribble with both hands. He can finish with both hands. He's just a really, really complete player for a guy that young. I think that that's a very great base to build upon. He's just really got to work on that jump shot, and the free throws in Spain were a little worrying for me, for me as well. But I think, like I said, I think Dre is the guy. Excuse me. I don't need his mom in my Twitter mentions.
Yes.
I think Dre's got to be the guy, just because he really is the only guy on this roster who can really run pick and roll at a high level, I think. And that's because he's the only guy on the roster who I trust to make a jump shot off the dribble right now.
Right.
Maybe Damas can get there. Maybe I guess TSJ showed a little bit of it last year in the mid-range. Ty shot a mid-range jump shot, but I don't foresee him taking too many of those. But I think that, he can score at all 3 levels. He's very explosive off the dribble, especially going right. I see no reason as to why he can't do exactly what Epps did last year, where, he's just like, get out of jail free. Okay, the shot clock's at 10. Here's a hot potato. Go make some magic happen. You're a really talented scorer. Probably going to be guarded by guys off the bench who are a little less talented than the guys in the starting lineup, especially, when like some of the mid to low tier teams that they're going to play in the conference, like, Wisconsin, that's a little dismissive, but, the guys like Wisconsin doesn't have super great depth.
Yeah.
Minnesota, teams like that, like, the teams that you have to beat to make the tournament, so I think that he can really do a lot of damage against those teams. And I think he also has the ceiling, if he really puts it together and has a good shooting year, he could really be a problem off the bench, because that guy can really, really score. And he's also a great transition player. And I think that he matches really well with Dane off the bench, because you can play him and Dane in the pick and roll. Dane's the best screener they have on the team because of his frame. And I think that that can open up a lot of opportunities for a guy like Dre.
As long as he puts his body on somebody else.
Yeah, and I think that, he's really going to need to play hard on defense, because he's not the biggest guy, but I do think he has the athleticism and the wiggle to be able to get around screens well. And especially with Dane, when Dane's in the game, they're going to be playing that drop. So he's going to need to get over those screens and really battle. And that's going to be what's going to keep him on the floor.
Yeah. Do you think Moretti will play in Big Ten play at all? That's
a great question. If health permitting, I would say no.
Yeah.
But I could see a world where someone goes down, or maybe their offense is just so bad. They just need more, pick and roll offense, more simple offense. And if nothing else, he can provide that. So I would say if things go well, then we shouldn't see him, but I don't think that it's off the table that he could come into the game.
Sure.
Yeah, I think that that's the exact opinion that I would have, and I think So
I
nice.
Think you said there's no shot he plays Big Ten ball.
Yeah, there's pretty much no shot. I mean, outside of their offense being terrible, like you said, like I don't see it happening. And also Hinkle negative. You think I'm negative? What the hell is this?
We know Hinkle's negative though.
It's September. I mean, let's give it a rest before we go too hard.
Yeah,
30% would be better than last year, I think, right?
Well.
I think they're like
the line moving back up. There we go.
I don't know. My next thing is about Coleman Hawkins. He's a guy that wants to play in the NBA. Do you think we see a more assertive Coleman Hawkins this year? A guy that tries to produce a little bit more to rise his stock in the NBA, or do we get a more guy that's still trying to what's the word I'm looking for? Run things. I mean, basically,
I think
and facilitator.
Last year I think he really kind of struggled to find that balance, like you said, and I think a lot of that was because this was the first year that he was really counted upon. If you remember his sophomore year, the Big Ten title year, he started out really well when Kofi was suspended, and he was really kind of looking like he was going to be ready that year, and then he kind of ran into a rut. And I think part of that was because of the reason that he, when Kofi's playing 25, 30 minutes a night, you just can't play him all that much at the 5. And so I think that last year they really tried at the start of the year to make the 5-out thing work. I think there's a myriad of reasons as to why that didn't happen. We've covered a couple of them so far. RJ not being able to take advantage of mismatches, Terrence's limited half-court ability, Mayer's kind of just, freestyle attitude on offense, hijacking possessions. And then, the freshman guard situation was just super fluid and just and really up and down. And so I think it's when there's all that going on, it can be really hard for a guy like Coleman, who's always been a pass first guy, even going back to high school, to figure out, where his spots are, what my time is, because he's learning on the fly, just like everyone else was last year. And so I do hope that we see more assertive Coleman, especially if they're going to play him at the 5. When teams switch pick and roll, when he runs pick and roll or pick and pop, he has to go post. Last year, he didn't do it, especially at the start of the year. That was a huge reason why the 5-out didn't work, was because teams would switch the pick and roll between him and Terrence or him and Epps, and he would just go and set another screen so they could switch the big back on him, or he'd just go float around on the perimeter. He has to go sit his butt down on the block because he can really score down there. He's 6'10". He's got a good right hand. He's, especially when they switch, he's got a good handle. And he can get caught sometimes being a little too pass first, especially when he's posting up. Those are some of his worst turnovers because they're live ball. He's throwing it across the court. They just take it and go. But I think that needs to be for him to score more and for him to really be an offensive option in the half court more than just when he's making, 4 threes, which is once every, 6-7 games for him. He needs to have a consistent option in the half court, and for that to be posting up, especially if they're going to run that 5 out, he has to post up switches. So I'll be interested to see, because I think that it goes against his nature as a player and what he's done his whole career.
Right.
But if he wants to make the NBA, he's going to need to show that he can take advantage of that, because there's a ton of guys his size who can maybe not defend like he can with his IQ. I think he's a special defender.
Yeah,
I think he's the best defender they've had in this program in the Underwood era. But I think that there's a lot of guys who are good athletes at 6'9", 6'8", 6'10", who can guard on the perimeter and who can, bang inside and do a facsimile of what he does, who also can, have self-creation skills and stuff that they can do when a 6'4", 6'3" guy gets switched onto him. They can do something to put the ball in the basket. And I don't think that Coleman showed that last year. And especially for an older guy, there's not going to be much bet on upside. So he's really going to have to show that if he wants to make it in the league.
Yeah.
I want to make a Coleman point here. I think one of the biggest things with him this season will be usage. He was top 280 in minutes percentage for players last season. He played a ton of minutes, and I think it's going to be very important that they don't overuse him this year. And I think that's probably where Quincy Guerrier, I think that's where he comes into play. But yeah, he was used so much. Like his minutes percentage went
so he's
30,
not playing 38 minutes a game this year,
especially at the end of the year. It got really bad when Dane was less playable. He was playing like 35 minutes of center, and I don't think I like him at center, but that's a lot to ask of a guy his size, especially in the Big Ten when you're playing. At the time it was like Dickinson and Edey, like basically back to back. Maybe it was back to back.
Yeah, you think
so?
Like
that's a tough ask for a guy his size. Really tough.
Well, plus the double overtime Michigan game for 49 minutes. So
and he started bringing the ball up against Purdue too when he was playing the 5. So he wasn't just.
That's the option he gives you. He can do that.
Absolutely.
And, when hopefully we don't see that as much this year, but if a team's really given our backcourt problems, I'd love to see him be more. The coaching staff give him more of a green light to bring the ball up, because Zach Edey's not going to go press him in the backcourt. So, and if they come with his own press, he's 6'10". He can just, throw the ball over the top. So,
yep, absolutely. Last episode, we did a floor and a ceiling for this year's team. What we thought, Ethan basically said they couldn't make they wouldn't make the tournament, or they'd win the Natty. So, his opinion doesn't matter on that.
Entirely true, but whatever.
But in the Big Ten, what do you think their floor and ceiling is, and then also tournament wise?
Yeah, I'm very optimistic to my core as a fan. I do think this team in the perfect world can win a Big Ten title. That's probably going to require basically all the pieces hitting. It's going to require Ty to be a good point guard. It's going to require Damas to shoot well and to, really be able to punish mismatches. It's going to require Guerrier to really rebound. And it's going to require the team to stay, for lack of a better term, locked in. I think last year they really got loose. But, even I want to say during the Michigan game, or no, the Ohio State game, that was the game. They still had a chance to win the Big Ten title if they won out from that point, and results fell where they may. So I think that, they have the talent to do it. I think that you look around the conference, you can't go, guy for guy at the top of the roster like we can. We have 2 NBA players in Coleman and Terrence. I really do believe that. And so, there's not a lot of teams that can match that level of firepower. And even you go down the bench, who's bringing a guy like Dane off the bench in the league, like a guy who can really go get his own, shoot 60%, shoots with either hand. Let's get some of those free throws up a little bit, big fella. I believe in you. There's just not teams that have the depth of talent. I think that's a testament to the coaching staff. So, like I said, if everything really clicks, I think that they can challenge those Purdue's and those Michigan States. They beat Michigan State last year, basically the same roster coming back. I don't know. That's not a matchup. That's a matchup I really want to see, because I think those are really 2 great teams. That's going to be 2 awesome play styles and just like last year, super competitive game. Purdue, they were missing. Terrence Shannon was getting picked in the backcourt. They had the ball with a chance to go up with like 30 seconds on the road. So
after being down 30 or whatever,
exactly. I don't think that they're that far off talent wise. It's just going to come down to do things come together for them, and I think that's the big disadvantage they have compared to Purdue and Michigan State, who bring really everything back.
Sure.
Obviously, we have a lot more continuity than last year, but they're really going to need to have the new pieces come together in the non-con, so that when the conference season starts in earnest, they're really going to be able to hit the ground running, because Purdue and Michigan State are going to rack up those wins because they're built to win.
Right.
Now, as far as the floor, I am an optimist, but there is a world where this team shoots, 28, 29% from three. There's no improvement from the free throw line. So offenses, back in the 60s and 70s nationally. And, the defense, I'm very optimistic about it. But if they have to make lineup changes where Ty comes out of the lineup for, a DGL to provide more offense in the starting lineup, that's going to be a huge defensive downgrade. And so, I can see, like I said, if the offense is struggling to the point where they need to change things around to sacrifice defense for offense to keep the ship afloat, I could see them having a year like last year where they end up, fifth, sixth, maybe a tie for like fifth, whatever it was. I know there was a car wreck in the middle of the conference last year where there was like 10 teams basically within like 2 losses of each other. So, I could see them around there. But I think that a lot would have to go wrong. Maybe an injury to one of the key players for a long period of time. I just think that there's so much talent that even like we saw last year, I mean, what else could have gone wrong last year? RJ forgets how to shoot. Sky just leaves the team. Epps forgets how to shoot. Mayer, is Mayer. And so
Luke
even
Goody
that team
was out for
Goody missed basically the entire year, and so even that team was able to scrape together a 20-win season. So I don't think the floor is as low as some people might.
Ethan said 10,
but I think that middle of the conference, I'd say like 6th, 7th would probably be the floor for me. Barring
I was 8th,
a team like dying of the Black Plague or something like that.
Yeah. How far do you think they can get in the tournament this year?
Yeah. I'm
all depends on draw, right? With Illinois. So
yeah, with the right draw, I think they could go far. If I had to put a number on it, I would say that the Elite Eight would be a good result. I would say that the second round should be a baseline. I think they definitely should win a game this year. They've got, like I said, they've got elite NBA talent that stacks up across the country, not even just in the Big Ten. There's not a lot of teams that have prospective NBA players on their team. And so, like I said, I think that especially if they do well in the conference season, they're going to put themselves in a good position in the tournament to get a good seed. Hopefully, man, we get a good draw. I know we've had a rough run of things. You just got to say that we're due this year. So, like I said, I think Elite Eight it would be a great result for this team, especially if they get a good draw. But they should definitely win a game at least in the tournament. And I swear they're gonna make the second round at some point. Why not this year? Or the second weekend, excuse me.
Yeah, we hope so.
We got this Lakers guy. I mean, okay.
Oh, come on now.
Overhyping.
I mean, I told you I told you I was an optimist.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
But like I said, there's a world where things aren't as good. I just think that, they weren't. I know Ethan says otherwise. I think that they were a bad team more for off the court reasons than on the court. There was just so much turmoil last year, so much just stuff going on in the year. Even Kansas on top of the Epps thing on the court, he had that incident in practice where he collapsed or whatever happened there, and so there was just a lot of drama last year. I think that stuff leaks onto the court, and I think that you could tell really early on that there was something wrong, and so that could happen again. It's another situation where they're bringing in a lot of new pieces that they're going to be asking to be contributors, and Underwood's a guy who's going to get on people's nerves. I think that's just the way he is. I think that's part of what makes him good is because his teams always play with an edge. They always play like they're, like he's going to put guys out there that are going to, go scrap and go dive on balls and go play with an attitude. And so, it could go badly, but I think you just look at the level of talent on this roster and you just compare it to anyone else in the conference. And this team stacks up talent-wise with literally anyone. So
and I think that bringing in guys like Harmon and Domask and Guerrier, instead of the splash and having a more cohesive team like when Io and Kofi were there and Trent Frazier. I mean, those teams just seemed like they clicked, and I think that this team will probably be more like that. I hope they're more like that.
They better be. I really got to get after this Lakers guy. Number one,
Kansas fan.
Are you a Lakers fan as well? And also, no shit, Kansas is better. Like, that's how it should be. I mean, they have a better coach. They have a much better track record of being great. They won a national championship last year. What is the point in coming in and saying that? Like, we don't know that? Like, we're going to deny that Kansas is not better? I don't get that at all. But we'll talk to you on October 29th when Illinois runs them
for ourselves, man.
up and down the floor. Hunter Dickinson is going to be crying for his mother. That's going to be a beatdown, just like last year, the secret scrimmage. Illinois smoked them. We all know it. I don't care what anybody says.
Ethan knows it for sure.
Pull up the records. But yeah, I don't understand why we're coming in and just saying, "Oh, the Kansas is better." Yeah, thanks. I had no idea. Thanks for bringing us down. I got a phone call. I'm good. So
it's Lakers TV 024 calling.
I'd love for him to call in. Let's go. But imagine being a Lakers fan. Whatever. Yeah. So I think this team. I think we should all be in wait and see. You know,
we are. I feel like this is a very wait and see team. But we'll find out. On top of that, do you think that this team on paper or even not on paper is better than the team we had last year?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question because, last year, I think just man for man, I think they were more talented last year. Right. I think that they had a lot of guys, even to the point where there was too many guys, there were too many mouths to feed. Guys got unhappy. I think that just from a pure talent perspective, there's been some downgrades. Obviously, I think that Meyer is a more talented basketball player than Quincy Guerrier. I think that RJ is a more talented basketball player than Marcus Damask. I think that Epps is a more talented basketball player than Harmon. But I think that the fit, like we've said, and the expectations of the guys that are coming in is going to be a lot more healthy toward this being a more cohesive unit than last year. So I think man for man, they might not be as good as they were last year, but I think that this is going to fit together better. And I think that, like I said, a lot had to go wrong last year. And so for them to be a better team than last year, I don't think is that like crazy of a statement. So yeah. I do think they're better.
Okay. I got a couple more things for you, and then we'll let you get out of here.
I'm always ready.
The class of 24, we know that Marez Johnson's coming. We know Jason Jaxtis. How do you say that?
He's never going to play. Who cares?
That looks about like how it's supposed to be said.
Yeah. So Johnson moved up to number 35 in the new 247 rankings. Jaxtis went from unranked to 111th. I think most Illini fans know that Mikey Lewis is on campus this weekend.
Yep.
Who is when you look at him, he's anywhere from 78th to 47th, depending on what you're looking at.
We're excited at that.
Who do you think Illinois adds? Anybody else? I mean, do you think they're going hard after Mikey Lewis and then where they stop or?
Yeah, I think they're going to add a guard for sure. I think you look at there's just naturally going to be a lot of opportunity next year. Terrence is gone. Damask is out of eligibility. I would think that they're probably going to look for Rogers to move more towards, a hybrid forward spot like Andre Jackson to put a comp out there, a more hybrid forward spot to make room for some of their talented guys coming up like Dre, excuse me, man. It's with an A. I just, and so for Dre and even for Nico coming up, I think that they're going to want to give, him at least a path to playing time, even Sincere. So there is going to be, opportunity at the guard spot. And so I do think that they're going to bring it in. And I think they're still, looking for a long-term guy at that guard spot. Because like I said, I think that in the perfect world, Ty isn't going to be your starting point guard just because of it's always going to be a square fit unless he turns into an 80% free throw shooter and, is at least able to take jump shots. So yeah, I do think they're looking at another guard. I know that they've been linked with that Jace Butler kid who's not quite as flashy, but is someone that if Lewis falls through is someone that's more or less kind of like, the bird in the hand where, he's the guy that you can probably snap up if you want him, if you really push. And so, I think that you look at the 24 class as a whole, I think they picked up, the centerpiece in Morez. That was huge. Obviously that's been locked in for a long time. He's an incredible player, a guy who can be a cornerstone for your program for a couple of years. Hopefully we get him for a couple of years. I think that, there's going to be some big questions when he gets on campus as to how long he's going to be there, depending on how quickly he develops. But I think you got Jaxtis, who's, more of a project guy. There's been loose comparisons to Coleman. I think that's not the worst comp I've ever heard. He's in kind of the same range.
He looks more like a Michael Finke to me, but
yeah, he's in the similar rankings range to where like Ethan Happ was coming out of high school. So just kind of that, long-term prospect. A guy who can play facing the basket, which is nice for a guy his size. He's got decent enough athleticism. I watched their game against Joliet West, who was the team that the Fears brothers played on, and he didn't look completely out of place switching onto those guys and protecting the rim against those guys. And those are obviously two, high-level top 50 Power 5 recruits. So I think that he's not, a Lieb or, a complete stiff, like someone who's just going to, take up a scholarship for a couple of years. All due respect to Lieb. That would be my move too if I was him. But he's a guy who, when you put some more weight on him, could he turn into a Coleman where, he's a guy who's, a 4-year guy who's really able to, be a consistent piece in this modern world of, players flying around. He's from Illinois, so that I would assume lessens the risk of him transferring out if he doesn't, isn't on the same page as the coach the first year, whatever. And so I think that was a good pickup. And then they're going to need a guard because, like I said, the cupboard's a little thin after this year because Harmon's also another one going to be out of eligibility. So they're just going to need to reload that cupboard a little bit. And I think that, Lewis seems to be their priority right now. I think they're obviously going after him if they're having him on campus for an official visit. I'm pretty sure that's a Chester guy. So he's had their current assistant coaches have had a very good track record of locking down guys. So we'll see. The buzz I want to say is that LSU is leading right now. But with him on campus, LSU isn't their last visit. Ole Miss is their last visit, which is a little bit of an eyebrow raiser with Chris Beard. That's a scary guy to see at the end of a visit list. But we'll see how it goes. If he comes in, that'd be awesome. He's a very talented player. I want to say he was top 5 in the EYBL in scoring, which is the Nike AAU circuit, which is considered the best competition of all the high school circuits. So he's a guy who can really score. He fits the pretty classic Underwood combo guard model where, you can throw him in a bunch of ball screens and he can make plays for himself primarily. He can also, if teams really load up on him, he can make plays for other guys. And then if he doesn't work out, I think Butler isn't a bad prospect. He's got some size. I think he's a bigger guard, like physically he's broader. I think that that profile fits well in the Big Ten. You need to have guys who are physically capable of taking punishment, basically 2 through 5, even 1 through 5. Sometimes, guys like Hepburn will take you down onto the block. So I think that they're going to add another piece. And I think if I had to guess, it's going to be one of those 2 guys.
Okay. All right.
I think it would, and this is just a stupid comment, but I'm just going to say it. I think
that's what you're good at.
That doesn't stop me.
Is there still, Merez Johnson, I'm 99% sure he's coming.
Merez is not going to come.
Well, you always have to be.
If he would have decommitted, I would have thought he would have done it by now because he's been committed for a long time.
Right.
Yeah, I think
2 years now, right?
Yeah, literally, I think his sophomore year in high school is when he committed, which is crazy. Especially nowadays, you really don't see that, and especially for a guy like him who, if you reopen his recruitment right now, I mean, there'd be names in that inbox. So,
yeah. You talked about Brad Underwood's offense. Do you think we see the everybody switching defense again this year?
I would guess that's the plan. And I think that, especially with Rodgers at point guard, you're going to want to do that because he is 6'6", over 200 pounds. It's going to be hard for that guy to play and drop because he's not going to be able to get through screens like a Trent just because he's that big. Right. And so I think that he's a guy, I'm fine with him switching onto centers. I think he's a guy who can really rebound at any position. And then obviously Coleman's a guy I'm comfortable switching out on guards. And even Garrier's a guy I don't feel that bad about him being able to switch onto guards. Obviously he's not someone I'd match up with perimeter players, but if teams want to, if teams are afraid of going at Coleman in the pick and roll and they're trying to find a weak link, I don't think Garrier's that guy. I think it's going to have to be Damask or Goody, whichever, because I think one of those 2 is going to to be on the floor basically at all times, just because the shooting is very necessary. Right. And so I think that those guys are pretty, Damask is a thick guy. He's old. He's going to be able to switch onto bigger dudes and really compete. So I think that they are going to switch, especially from the start of the year. And, obviously last year there was ups and downs with that. I think that the continuity hopefully should help with that. I think there was a lot of bad communication. RJ and Matthew were really bad.
Those were the 2 that made that not work.
Yeah. And so I think that, and even Epps and Clark didn't have as much really bad moments in that, but that was mainly because they were the ones who were doing the switching onto the primary players. And so it's kind of hard to you're not going to switch onto Jaime Jaquez. Come on.
Yeah.
So those guys didn't really get asked to do a lot of off-ball switching as much as Mayer and RJ did. And so I think that the older guys like Damask and Garrier hopefully will be able to communicate better. And so there's going to be less, 2 guys running out to the 3-point line and a guy standing on the block for a first grade layup.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think, the RJ thing last year that was a disaster. He looked like, what's his name in Benchwarmers in the outfield? Clark, maybe the outfielder.
He just looked like he didn't know anyone. He wasn't talking to anyone. It was weird.
Yeah.
No clue what he was doing out there. And I think that this year's team has a lot more guys that are going to buy into that and a lot more guys who are willing to play defense.
Yeah.
And say you want about Matthew Meyer, I don't think he was here for his defense. It's not like his defense was like he could do a little bit. He was a good shot blocker. I mean,
I'm not hating on him for not.
Or you're taking drive-bys at him. But
that was not a shot at him. I just said that's why that defense didn't work.
It didn't work because RJ stinks. It's solely on RJ.
It's not even the same thing.
It's not solely on RJ, but I'm gonna say it is. And RJ went to where'd he go? Georgia.
Yeah.
Yikes. I mean, it didn't work out.
The other thing I'll say about the defense is last year, I want to say they finished around like 30th nationally on KenPom. Yeah. And for this team to work, they're going to need to get it up into like that 20 to 10 range, even hopefully higher if they're really going to be a great team. If they're going to challenge for a Big Ten title, that's going to need to be like a top 10 defense. Yeah. I think they have the personnel to get that done.
I think they got a lot of guys
going to need to match the talent level defensively because last year it wasn't even close.
Well, let's also
got a lot of guys that want to work hard is what it seems like.
Let's also throw this out there. Last year's team was the second best Brad Underwood Illinois team in defensive efficiency. So they were 26th. And then 2022, they were 29th. 2020, they were 35th. And then obviously the best one was 2021, they were 7th. So last year's team somehow was efficient defensively. I think some of that is probably luck. Some of it is probably not getting like you're playing a team like Michigan who's wildly inefficient. There's a lot of those teams you're going to play, whether it's Minnesota. But
that's because they average like 7 blocks a game.
I was going to say that Coleman Dane front court is really tough defensively. I think that offensively, there's a lot of questions about it. And I think that's the main reason why it's kind of hard to play those guys big minutes together because Coleman is, like I said, I just think he's a center. I think that, he struggled to mesh with Kofi, who is an All-American, one of the best players in program history. Dane is an incredible talent. He's one of my favorite players, but he's a similar build as Kofi, where he's going to be on the block 90% of the game. And so I think that front court is incredible defensively, and having that option is big time, and it can help you swing games. But I don't think you shouldn't build the whole plane out of it.
Right. All right.
Well, I also think that one thing that kind of helped last year's defense outside, like they were 8th in the country in block percentage, and they're also 17th in 2-point percentage defensively, and they were 12th or 24th in effective field goal percentage. So those are 3 big stats where they're amongst the best teams in the country. That's going to boost your efficiency. They weren't great at guarding the 3, but they were good at backing teams away from that. And I think that this year's team is going to be even better than that because like last year's team was – because if you look at Illinois in the Underwood era by block percentage, it was bad before last year. It was 262, 263, 257, 268, 310. So that's last year's adding another element. And I know you don't have Meyer, who was a big part of the shot blocking, but you have the same 2 guys, like you said, Coleman and Dane. Yeah. And then you bring in Guerrier, and you got other guys as well that can block shots. So I think
the guys who made that defense good are basically all back. Coleman, Dane, Terrence, Rogers, Sincere, all those guys are back. So hopefully I'm very hopeful about Guerrier defensively. I think that, in the game that was shown in the Spain trip, he had a really nice block off the backboard. He almost put a guy on a poster. He's a guy who can play above the rim and provide that shot blocking. It's just going to be, like I said, I think the question is a lot more about execution than talent level.
Yeah. We got one more here for you. This was Ethan's only contribution to this thing. So go ahead.
Do I have to ask it? I was just
absolutely.
Okay. I don't even know what we said about this, but I did allude earlier to how you think Colgate's gonna beat them.
I can get what we said, but go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead. No, I'm just kidding. What games do they lose in the non-conference? Like if you look at the schedule right now and you think of games that you think they will lose, what are they?
Yeah, I don't think they lose any of the bye games or like the really bad team games. I think their talent floor is just so high that I just have a really hard time seeing them lose. Like even the bad games last year they had, or like the issues they had last year, they still made those teams look really bad. Like even when they were struggling in that middle of the non-con with like the Missouri and the Northwestern losses, they still, I want to say, beat Alabama A&M by like 20 points. And that was a game where Underwood like came out of the locker room like with 10 minutes to go or something like that. Like he was just like just wasn't even like, he was not feeling the team at that time.
Yeah.
So I think that, guys like Dane really make it super hard to lose those bad games. I think we saw that in Spain as well. Like, he's just such a monster on the block. Like, when he's in the game, he's really going to control. If you don't have like multiple guys to put on him, he can really control. And then obviously, they're so good in transition. When those bad teams have bad turnovers or missed shots, they just, 1-2 passes and Terrence is dunking it. So I don't think they lose any of the bad games. Or to any of the bad teams like Colgate or I don't know who else they play, like Western Illinois, stuff like that.
Eastern,
I don't have the schedule in front
Oakland,
of me. Yeah, like they're not going to lose to any
Valparaiso.
school with a direction in front of the name. I do think they're going to lose one of their bigger games. The Missouri game's been super hard to like get a read on the whole Underwood era. Basically, it feels like the worst team wins every single time. Obviously, last year we got absolutely destroyed. That was one of the most embarrassing games I've ever watched. Really Underwood-like performance in all aspects. But like I said, that one's just a hard one to get a read on. I want to say that we're going to win it this year, just because I think Mizzou is losing Kobe Brown, who is a huge part of their team last year, and they were really old last year, and so they're losing a lot of that experience. I like Dennis Gates as a coach a lot. I think that apologies if this ever gets there, but Cy Young or CY Young, I know he was considered by Illinois when we were replacing the full staff. He's an outstanding assistant. He was at Florida State when we were looking at him. So I think that they're going to really be a problem, but I'd like to think we win that game. I think that the game we lose is Tennessee. I think that's a road game against a really good defensive team. I think that could be, just one where, they really struggle to get it going and they don't shoot very well. That crowd's going to be ready to go. So I could see them losing that game. I do think they beat FAU. And you know what? We'll count it as part of the non-conference. I think they lose to Kansas in the exhibition, but I think it's a lot closer than people think.
Sure.
They're going to kill Kansas. That's over. That's already.
I could see it. I mean, listen, neither team's going to be playing their rotation, and we can go 10 deep with anyone. So we'll see.
Did you say? I'm sorry, I spaced out for a second.
No problem.
Did you say Marquette?
Oh yeah, that game always that game's at home, right? Yeah, because
it is a home game.
So yeah, I think they win that game. I think that they're set up to beat Marquette pretty well. I think that they have the defensive backcourt to really give that team problems, and then I think that they've always competed really well in those non-conference games at home. I think of that Arizona game where they took that 1 seed, basically down to the buzzer on a pretty average Kofi game. And so I think that, when that crowd really gets going, that's a really tough place to play. And I think they're going to be ready to go for that Marquette game. And like I said, I think we have the backcourt defense to really give that team some problems.
Sure. So me and Ethan did it the other day. This is not our final picks, by the way.
Of course.
This is unofficial. My losses were Marquette, Colgate, Tennessee, and those were my 3. So Ethan's 3 were Missouri, Tennessee, and Florida Atlantic. So
mine seem way more sensible.
I kind of like where you're coming from. I'd go Tennessee and Mizzou if I had to pick right now. I think that the FAU game, I really back them to win that game. I think that FAU is a great program. They obviously did really well last year, but I think that there's not going to be the element of surprise that I feel like they had last year. I think
a bit of a target,
especially in MSG. That's going to be a game that the team's going to be up for. I think that they really performed well there last year. I think that Underwood is actually pretty good at those like big neutral site games outside the Mizzou game, which, like I said, is just like a really weird, like I said, every year it feels like the worst team loses going in. So yeah, I'd say Mizzou and Tennessee are the 2 that I'd expect them to lose. Or going into the game, I'm gonna be thinking like, okay, this is really gonna be one that they're gonna have to play really, really well to win it.
Sure.
There's also a chance, and it's kind of an off chance, that this team has either 1 loss or 0 losses going into Missouri, and then we're like, whoa, here we go.
And they're
gonna get smoked.
Yeah.
But also,
it does feel like they have weird losses in the non-con. Like they have never really had like a spotless non-conference from what I can remember in the Underwood, or at least like one where they win all the games where it feels like they're supposed to. So even though I am kind of marking off like basically like 2 of their like 3 hardest games as the losses, it's not impossible they could drop a bad one.
Yeah, sure. Which, if you look at like Brad's first year, they did lose to New Mexico State and UNLV, but those don't even really count. We don't need to remember those.
They lost to Eastern in the exhibition game.
Well, it's not a real game, so relax.
Still.
They also started 2-7 in year 2 and lost at home to a Georgetown team that wasn't good, and Notre Dame wasn't good. They lost to them, and they also lost to FAU. If you remember, that was the Kofi visiting. Yeah.
Yep.
So there you go. But yeah, I think the Missouri game, who knows what the hell is going to happen? We never know. But people probably should start asking if Brad Underwood was the greatest coach to ever coach at Madison Square Garden, because he's 2-0 there.
I mean, the guy doesn't lose there.
Yeah, he's 2-0 there. He beat a good Maryland team. Tevion Jones game. Some people
I think they beat 2 ranked teams there.
Yeah,
I want to say Maryland was ranked for that game.
And the Texas game last year, which obviously credit to Illinois for sticking around, but that didn't look good there for a while. Yeah, that was what this team looks like when they win. And then there was games like the Missouri game, what it looked like when they lost, or any Penn State game that's ever happened, which thank God Shrewsbury's gone from Penn State, and you don't have to deal with that anymore. But there's also no Big Ten ACC Challenge anymore, so we won't be seeing Notre Dame all the time. Because how many times is Brad Underwood coaching against Notre Dame? Like 500 times. They play them all the time.
I know. I'm a little. I have to say, I was really annoyed last year when we got Syracuse because obviously I think that the schedule was announced before we got the 2 big transfers, but I was really hoping for a big team, and so I'm glad that we got Marquette this year because, in my opinion, this is a program that deserves that kind of respect. Like, we should be playing the best teams from these other conferences, and I think that's one thing that I really like about Underwood is that he's not afraid to set up something like this Kansas thing, or he's not afraid to go and play FAU in New York. Like, that's not a super huge name program, but when Gross was here, we weren't playing on like ESPN. We weren't playing in these big national events. Like, we didn't have these like exciting teams that people want to see on TV. So, kind of to bring this full circle, like the Fire Underwood people, like, I'll admit it, in this last offseason, I've thought about like what it would take for me to want him out because, obviously last year was really rough. And to me, the bar is like when we're not interesting anymore. And that doesn't seem to be going away anytime soon.
Sure.
Well, he's also not afraid to he did a home and home against Arizona.
Yeah.
And then he signed
Tennessee's going to be a home and home.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. Well, and Marquette is technically a home and
I guess it
was.
You can look at it that way.
That's how it was set up, I think.
Brilliance of the Gavitt games to really change things up. Very nice.
Yeah. I know that you're a basketball guy, but I got to ask, play Penn State tomorrow. I'm sure that you still watch the football team.
I do watch the football team. I'm not much of a college football guy, especially with the relocate or realignment stuff. I think that's like a disgrace, to be honest. But I think that they're going to show out well tomorrow. Like I said, I'm always going to be an optimist. I don't know any other way to be a fan of a team. But I think that the home crowd's going to be ready to go. Obviously, if things go bad early, I can see that the wind coming out of the sails. But I like the way that they responded in that second half against Kansas. I thought it would have been really easy for them to just roll over and die because they didn't look very good against Toledo. They obviously had that horrible first half against Kansas. There's a lot of new fate, or there's a new defensive coordinator, so it would have been really easy, like I said, for them to just kind of okay, well, this same old Illinois, we're throwing in the towel. But I think that they show out well. I think that they played Penn State tough basically every year in the Bielema era. I want to say that they've played them. I think that they have the guys in the trenches to match up. Like I said, I'm not a huge college football guy. I know they've got a big quarterback, Penn State does, and I feel like they always have good wide receivers. But from what I remember, I want to say that everyone was talking about how good Penn State is in the trenches this year, and that's why a lot of people think that they can, compete for a Big Ten title. So I think that we have the dudes in the trenches to be able to go head to head with those guys. Mm-hmm. And like I said, home crowd, this one's been a big game for, since it's been announced. Obviously, the big noon kickoff thing is not great, but it is what it is. There's no reason why they shouldn't be able to at least put up a decent performance, I'd like to say.
Yeah, I think they need to, or, Illinois fans are quickly going to fall off the bridge.
It's very much beaten dog, especially for Illinois fans for football.
Yeah.
Like the moment things go bad, I understand it. There hasn't been much to be happy about.
Yeah.
Well, if we even get started on Colorado, then I will go for another hour.
We're not.
I won't.
Imbrats, I think this wraps up Underwood nicely. It's nice to be excited about a season, and he thinks that he will be for years to come.
We got a lot of talent, and they're going to be a blast to watch. Like even the chaotic moments, they're going to have athletes out there, and they're going to be playing wild. But I'll take that over. Amazing player. I'll take that over Malcolm Hill shooting 50 mid-range jump shots.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
And I pulled up this non-conference schedule, and it just made me see this thing here. You're a recent graduate of the U of I, so you weren't there during the Chief. You really didn't have anybody. What are your thoughts on the Kingfisher?
Yeah, that's a very polarizing question. Personally, I don't. I want to say I don't really care. I'd rather there be no mascot, to be honest.
I agree.
I'd say that as long as it's called the Fighting Illini,
that's my worry.
I'm of the opinion that the Chief did have to go. I'm not a big fan of Native American mascots, especially when they're being played by white people.
Sure.
But the Kingfisher thing, I don't know. Like Michigan doesn't have a mascot. Does that hurt their branding at all? Like, come on. It's kind of like, for me, it's just like it's trying to make something out of nothing. Like if the students really need it. I guess, but and
I'm kind of in the same boat as you. Like if they want to have a student run around in a bird costume, that's fine, but let's not change it to the Illinois Kingfishers.
Yeah, there's no reason. I would, keep the Fighting Illini.
Yeah, absolutely,
or at least don't have it be something as dumb as the Kingfisher.
There it is. Yes.
That is a disaster looking thing walking around campus. That looks so awful that I would quit, honestly.
Do you guys do podcasts at all?
Right? Not really. I've thought about it. It's just, especially during the season, that would be the time to really do it. You guys do a great job of finding stuff to talk about in the off season, but I'm not so good at that stuff. So
it gets tough in the off season.
But I used to do a radio show when I was in college, so I really enjoy this kind of stuff. So
yeah, we'll definitely have you back on.
And that is a guarantee. That's a guarantee because we've done that with other people before. We said we're going to have them back on, and then we don't. And that's not from a lack of trying, I guess, even though when we did have Deion Thomas on, I never tried to get him back on, but I felt like,
I think I'll be a little easier to reach than Deion.
Probably,
But Armchair Illini, you can follow him on Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, at Armchair Illini. Brian Binz, your ad is by Binz. It's BYBINZ. You want to plug anything else, or you got anything else you want to talk about?
That's just about it. Read me on the website. I'll have, if this Mikey Lewis thing really starts to pick up, I'll have a breakdown for him, or Jace Butler, whichever one seems to pick up there. And then, the season's almost here. I'll have more content once the ball starts bouncing.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you coming on. It's always nice to get another opinion rather than Ethan's terrible opinions and my stupid opinions.
Well, I thought you guys did great today.
No, we really enjoyed you. So thanks again for coming on. And like I said, we'll have you on again for sure. Your insight's really, really good, and we appreciate it. So
anytime, fellas.
Whenever I click the three dots here, it's going to say that you were kicked out, but that's just because that's the only way I can do this. So
I won't take it personal.
I'm going to hit you back up, and we're going to bring you back on maybe multiple times during the season, but we really appreciate it. And we'll talk again soon.
Absolutely, fellas. Have a great weekend.
You too.
Too. I had to kick him, but that's just how it goes. I had to let him know that I was kicking him. I wanted to be classy about it, but that was great. I mean, that was great. I thought that he did a great job there. I want to do a few things before we get out of here. It's September 15th. I'm not going to lie. I don't think we'll probably do another one for this month, but I guess there's a chance. Who knows what happens if there's any big news like Kingfisher wise, right? But October is a leading up month. I think we'll do a few in October, at least two, I would guess. We'll have a predictions one. And I kind of like doing an Illini Q&A type thing, just kind of a stream rather than even a podcast episode, which we've done that a few times before the season. So that would be good. I think we do want to do a watch party for the Maui game. And like
when
I
is
said,
that?
I think it's October 29th.
Okay.
Would be October 29th. That is a Sunday, I guess. So that's kind of weird. But I'm pretty sure it's got to be the 29th or the 27th. My keyboard's not working. So there you go. Can't even type. It's one of those 2 days, I think. So we'll do one. I mean, like I said, our banner has the old logo on it. So we're going to have to figure that out.
Yeah.
And I have a couple other ideas. Yeah, I have a couple other ideas that I want to maybe try for this season, including maybe getting the fans' voices a little bit more involved with the show. So keep an eye on that one, although nobody was even in the chat today. I mean, except for Imbrats and Hinkle, and then Brady shows up late. And this Lakers douchebag.
Brady, you're welcome anytime.
Sure.
If you're our number one fan, he said fans.
Number one fans. I feel like when people say number one fan, it's usually more than one person is actually the number one fan. But I don't think we have any number one fans because I think we like all of our fans equally, unless this Lakers guy is a fan and then he can go scratch. But, yeah, I don't know.
Good talk.
I don't know if I have anything else to say. I'm trying to think.
I got nothing. I think
I did see a prediction from the Champagne Room. One of their writers or whatever the hell they do had Illinois losing 52-16 tomorrow, and I think that's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if it weren't like 42-10.
You are not the optimist.
I'm an Oregon guy anyway, so I'm not even an Illini football guy. I just kind of observe and I tweet sometimes from our account because I know people will at least pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And just in terms of the Illini football team right now, say what you will about Luke Altmaier's numbers, I think he's way better than Tommy DeVito. Way more upside, can run, has a better arm, whatever.
Defense has been the problem with Illinois right now.
Secondary and linebackers have been atrocious, and then the subbing in the first game was a disaster, and Johnny Newton showed up against Kansas, and it didn't matter because their linebackers and secondary stink. Outside of, what's his name, Miles Scott, whatever his name is.
Michael Scott.
I think it's Miles Scott. Or Xavier Scott. I don't know who that is.
I think it's Xavier.
I think there's a Miles Scott, though. Who's the one who had the pick six against Toledo?
I don't know.
I'm going to find this out. I can't type still. Okay, I got to unplug my keyboard.
What are you doing in the show?
No, we're fine.
I need water and I need to go to the bathroom. We don't go this long usually.
I just got to look this up so I can be right. If somebody in the chat would do their job, we'd have to look it up.
Hey, while we're sitting here, I was on the GBS pod.
Miles Scott.
I believe there's 2 episodes. I think they're both out now. If you guys want to listen to that, I made fun of Ethan mainly, and we talked about some stuff. So,
yeah, there's also the YouTube video.
Yeah, where you can watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, I am.
We're going to do another one with him, and Ethan's actually going to show up this time. So.
Sure. If they want views, then yeah.
Absolutely. Or people that actually know what they're talking about, right?
Another good point. I put the YouTube link in the chat there. The podcast link, I don't know where it's at, but you can find it if you look it up. All right. I guess that's it. I mean, I could have gone another hour, but that's all right. We won't. Just know that I would have been willing to. But yeah, keep in mind or stay tuned. I tweeted a little thing last night, or 2 nights ago, for no reason at all, but just to kind of make people, like the tweets to know that we still exist. There's going to be a few changes coming this season, and they might not work. And guess what? If they don't work, I'm not going to be a general manager that refuses to fire the manager when they stink. I'm going to pull the plug if it doesn't work. It's that simple. Because this
like
podcast,
TikTok, huh?
The TikTok thing. I mean, I'll throw this out in the universe now. If anybody comes across this. If somebody wants to run a TikTok for us, please go ahead because I'm not doing it. There's a lot of things that I won't do.
Brady's ready for some merch.
Another thing that I refuse to do. It's too damn complicated.
All right.
The merch thing. So if you,
I'll look into that.
Well, you have more connections than I do in some of these businesses. So
that's true. Yeah, I'll see what I can do. We'll go from there. So.
And I would like to do another giveaway for the Bragging Rights game this year, so we'll figure something out for that. I
still got balls with the old logo on.
Well, kind of might have to make a change from that. Maybe we'll give people business cards as a giveaway. That would be hilarious. Soft take. I mean, this podcast stinks. It says it on my paper. Look at it right here. What does that last thing say?
Wow.
This podcast, did I write sucks? Yeah, sucks. That was a note that I had.
Are you trying to get rid of me like you did with your other podcast?
Well, you don't have to go there. I didn't get rid of anybody in that regard.
Well, you could have ended this 5 minutes ago.
I wanted to get us to 120 because you always think that I care about that, but I really don't. But it's funny if I just do. And this is another good point from Brady. That's spot on there.
Can't read.
I mean, if people from Verdon can't read.
Those Bulldogs can't read.
What the
You
hell?
still consider yourself a bulldog, Brady?
People from Girard, God
You're
knows what
definitely
they
not
can't
a
do.
panther, right?
All right. I mean, nobody even knows what the hell we're talking about now. So I think that's a good cue to end this thing.
Hold on.
I'll
8
wait
seconds.
for the answer.
Bullpups never die. So
There you go. That was, yeah. All right.
later.
That'll do it for us. Thanks to Brian for coming on. And we'll be back sometime soon in like 2 weeks, maybe 3. But